Hi, everyone. My name is Angie Yu, and I'm one of the founders and board members of Elevate. And I'm excited here to do a webinar with two of my dear friends, but also amazing female CEOs, Aetna Wun Trombley and Pearl Huang. And I think many of you might have seen my LinkedIn post where I talked about how you almost never see a woman fail up. And that's certainly the case with East Asian women. What I love about getting to know female CEOs is that they are awe-inspiring, and that's certainly the case with Pearl and Aetna. So with that, I'd love to just dive in and first kind of talk about their unique backgrounds. And what was super interesting, I mean, I've known Aetna for probably nearly 2 decades, and I've only recently gotten to know Pearl, but they actually share some commonalities, one of which both of their fathers were engineers and academics. They both thought they were going to go the path of medical school and science, often inspired by government funding, which is an important topic of this time, got them inspired to move more into the scientific research. Both of them have ties to MIT. Pearl is now on the board. So I just thought that was just really cool, just all these, the way we get connected with people in all the different ways. There are similarities, but also quite distinct, as you'll hear both from Pearl and Aetna's background. So maybe I'll start off, Pearl, with you. You grew up in a large family, which I know you say kind of attributes to your personality, your ability to be outgoing. But would love to hear about your background starting in high school, because you actually skipped your last year of high school, thought about the med school route, but ended up at MIT. And would love for you to start there.
Yeah, so thanks, Angie. And I feel like you've already done such a good job laying the groundwork that you make it so easy for me. But I was quite passionate about and just happened to be very good at math. And I ended up going on independent study for math because I just couldn't get enough of it. And I think the term is voracious. And so, a lot of teenagers are voracious about different things. For me, it was math. And I ended up spending a summer in an NSF-funded program with other students from all around the country to just do applied math and learn as much as we could and have a good time with it. Having fun is a really important piece here. And then I ended up, because I had sped through all the different classes and I was in a smaller town that had, a pretty regimented curriculum, but also was small enough so that people just let me do what I could do, that I ended up graduating in a year early and then went straight on to MIT. I had only applied, I know kids today apply to like 40 schools, 30 schools, because you've got the Common App. That's one of the reasons why, but also because the odds are so different now than they were when I was a kid. So I applied to one other program, which was the Interflex 6-year medical program at University of Michigan. I grew up in Northern Michigan and got in. And really, at the age of 17, had to go to my parents and say, I really, really don't want to be a doctor. What I really want to do is explore science. And so fortunately, they were fully supportive and let me do it, although it was harder on my mother probably than my father, who wanted, as many of our mothers do, to know that her child would have a steady income and have a job that was in a role that was needed by a community, any community. But I managed to meet some of her expectations in spite of that, and fell in love with science at a very early stage, and later in my career fell in love with drug discovery, and that's how I got to where I am today.
Now, Pearl, you were at MIT at a time when my guess is there were much fewer women. The ratio of women at MIT was lower. And I think you even mentioned like there was a culture where it's almost like you didn't feel like you were enough as a female.
Yeah, I mean, it was when I was there, that was a 9-to-1 ratio men to women, and I think that's a common experience for a lot of women who are educated in science and technology. Um, the the one thing I leaned into was the obvious fact that we were all nerds, and so that was our common ground, and very much tried to use that to form relationships with people. And I heard a phrase the other day from a woman engineer who had a similar experience in a totally different place, and she said, "The odds were good, but the goods were odd." And I and I think that's so funny, and
So true.
it's on one level, representative. And like I said, um, there was a commonality, which was love of science and technology, and this kind of nerdy approach to life, which I still very much to this day enjoy. I think it's a part of who I was when I started, and who parts of my personality that have been enriched as I've succeeded in this business.
And then you went on to do your PhD at Princeton,
Yeah.
which that alone was impressive. But the fact that you had 2 babies while doing your PhD blows my mind, because I could barely handle getting through my PhD.
Yeah. And, I have a son who recently completed his doctorate, and he said, "How did you do it?" And you know what my answer honestly is? I don't remember. I don't remember a lot of it because I was sleep deprived, but I had incredibly supportive family, incredibly supportive parents. I actually went back to Michigan and wrote my thesis in my mom and dad's house so they could watch the kids, so I could wrap it up. Yeah.
Wow. And then, we'll talk about Aetna, but your career really started in big pharma.
Yeah.
And you kind of went the scientist route, and you were one of the rare female Asians who made it to senior levels in multiple pharma. Can you just speak briefly about that part of your career?
Um, you're not supposed to say you're lucky, but there is an element of luck. And I also had really, really good mentors. I don't think anybody succeeds in large organizations without mentors. And, I remember just my first year in, this is a person who was pretty high up. He was director level, but he would walk the labs because he wanted to know what was going on. And he's formed relationships with everybody. What are you working on? What paper did you read? What matters to you? He was that kind of a leader. And I remember being in a meeting where it was completely normal to be what we now call mansplained, and it was a competitive environment. There was no doubt about it, but because the majority of people in that room, again, it was still like a 9-to-1 kind of ratio. It was dominated by male behavior. And I remember when someone repeated an idea that I had already described, and this leader said, "Wait a minute, didn't Pearl just already say that? That's Pearl's idea, right?" And so to me, that gave me the confidence that somebody was actually listening to me.
Yeah.
And also now today, if I'm in a room and I ever see something like that happen to anybody, I make a point of it, right? Because it means that people sometimes are so eager to talk, they're not listening. And I think part of this phenomenon is from people not listening. And if you want to be a leader, you have to listen, not
Yeah.
just talk.
That's a great leader. That's a great leader. And I do notice it happens to a lot of females in particular. There's a great book that Nina Totenberg wrote about her relationship with RBG, and even on the Supreme Court, that would happen to the women, and the two women would amplify each other and do the exact same thing. So I'd love to move on to Aetna and your career, starting when you were young, because you also thought about med school or going the med school path. So why don't you speak a little bit about that?
I'm going to have to warn everybody, like, just you don't have to go to MIT to end up in this role or any of these commonalities that Pearl and I actually have a chance to share. It doesn't actually have to apply to any of you guys. But I would say, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that probably is part of our cultural upbringing. You were told that to be successful, you have to have a career that is either in the STEM area or to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, right? And so you kind of dutifully, as a child, kind of follow through with that. But I think the other interesting thing that my dad was able to impart was that, as an engineer, and I was young, he really tried to like integrate me into what he was doing. So would bring me into his lab at work on weekends, try to like get hands-on experimentation, like just to see if I would enjoy it. And that's what I think that was, while I didn't realize the importance of this, as I was growing up, as I was thinking about it, that's probably where at the end of the day, when I went to college and, saw similar, like I had my first mentor and as an undergrad, my very first chemistry class, the professor just basically shared some experiments that he was running in lab, but in front of 300 freshmen. And I was really impressed by it because probably I was thinking about all the things that I was exposed to when I was young. And that's when I decided I'm changing my major immediately, got rid of the pre-med, went straight into chemistry and started working in this lab as my second quarter of freshman year. And I've been doing that ever since, or through my undergrad career. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because as you think about the arc of like just even going through school, and then you're like, okay, well, I just thought for many years I was going to be a doctor. Now I'm not going to be a doctor. What am I going to do? And that's when I realized, okay, well, what am I excited about? What do I like doing? And that's what I've learned in my course of my career, is just to do that. So I said, well, I like research, so I'm just going to continue to do that. And then applied to grad school, went to MIT. And I think, as you'll learn, I guess, after that, like it's been a very winding path to where I am.
Yeah, speak a little bit about that. I mean, you loved the research, but I think you realized research wasn't for you in terms of a long-term career. And, I think you kind of went soul searching, like, what the hell do you do?
Yeah.
You're not going to be a researcher. So kind of talk about how you ended up more on the business path.
I know, because you invested like 5 years in grad school, you like doing it, and then you go, okay, well, now what do I do with this, right? With this. And I would also say I got my PhD in physical inorganic chemistry, very male dominated part of the chemistry department, where everyone at the time, to be successful, you go into academia, but I just knew deep down that I didn't want to research one thing forever. So I set myself as, well, I want to continue doing research. So I was applying for industry positions. And then I met a friend of mine who had gone through a PhD in chemistry, and he came into town and said, let's grab a drink. And I said, well, what are you here for? And he's like, well, I'm a consultant and you should come and learn a little bit more about what I do. And I said, well, what does a consultant do? And I found myself at this info session that McKinsey was holding, where it's a bunch of PhDs and MDs and lawyer or JDs at the time. And it's trying, like, all of us were these smart, very like impressionable people that were really curious, but didn't know what to do with their careers. And I found myself one of them, and thought this could be a way to learn something new and explore. So I did my postdoc in business at McKinsey. And that's when I first actually met Angie.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting couple years, right? Like I worked with a lot of different companies, largely in the life science space. And that's when I really then became passionate about life science and how we can apply, back to the whole applying thread, like it's something very practical at the end of the day, in terms of where we conduct our research, but that can have impact on people.
And I think you mentioned your dad was kind of early. What happened with your dad when you were in high school was that early spark of why you wanted to go into healthcare. Maybe speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's always been, even though when you have Asian parents and they're really driving you, and sometimes you get super frustrated and super stressful, but then you think back, like how, in their way, they were really trying to like guide you. And, I probably only learned it a little bit too late, right? Like he was still trying to support me. And then my freshman year of undergrad, he passed away from liver cancer. And when you experience a loss like that, and you feel like how can a disease like that can have such an impact on you personally and obviously your loved ones, that's like also part of the driving force, right? In a lot of what we do. Well, at least for me anyway, from a day to day. And that's also helped me kind of like drive, like if people ask you, why are you doing this job? Like, this is a key reason of it, right? Like you have to have like this passion, and it has to come from somewhere that you really want to do something like this, because it's tough.
Totally. It's why I've spent so much of my career in oncology, because so many of us have been touched by cancer, family and friends. It's almost inevitable.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask both of you, since the title of this talk was The Myth of Meek Mamies and Dreaded Dragon Ladies. I think I already know the answer, but have you ever been a meek mamie or been called a dreaded, difficult dragon lady? And just talk a little bit about that.
To our face? I don't know.
Well, whether to your face or even just knowing, have you ever been, I mean, Aetna, you talked about a moment at McKinsey when maybe you were just brand new and you were somewhat meek, but kind of that moment. So speak about that, maybe.
Yeah, this one is a really formative one. I think hopefully that answers some of the audience questions that we got, prior to this webinar. So this was one of my first projects at McKinsey. And I was the most junior person on this on this project, and we were presenting to a client. And actually the clients were CEO, CFO, like C-suite, right, of this very large healthcare company. And then our McKinsey team, because it was such a senior team on the client side, was like the most senior director, like two partners, engagement manager, and like I'm the lowly associate that just joined like 2 months ago. And so all I remember is that the argument got very heated with between the clients. So you have like the CEO and the CFO just getting really upset with each other, and it was like people standing up, that kind of anger, like strange. I think I was also the only female in the room, by the way. So I was the only female and the most junior person in the room. And this is going on. No one is saying anything. I'm mortified. And all of a sudden someone's kicking me under the table. And it was the most senior person on McKinsey who was kicking me under the table. And I was like, what is going on? And he's whispered in my ear. He's like, you did the work. You did the analysis. You know the answer to this. Say something. And I was like, you want me to say something? Because these people are like literally at their throats, and like I have no idea how I'm going to bravely, say something. So afterwards, he gave me the feedback. He's like, I don't care who you are in the room, whether you're like, a director, a partner, or an analyst, right? Like you were the one that knew the answer, and you could just go in and speak. I don't care who it is, if it's the CEO of the client, and you should have done that. You always have a seat at the table and have a voice. And I think that's the one thing I learned very early. This is my first job. And I never had been put in a position like that to know. And I think that was something I bring up all the time as one of the.
And I can see that in you, in that you've always spoken with a sense of confidence and credibility, both you and Pearl. And, it was part of how I got to this, learning this about you was like, both of you have this foundation of confidence, this aura. And I do think, especially as a female Asian, you need to have that, right? You can, I literally think it's almost impossible to be successful and get to senior ranks if you are a meek, quiet female Asian.
No, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I think if you naturally have an opinion about something, you have to learn how to express it in a way that where it will be well received, right? And that's a skill set. So if you do it long enough, you get pretty good at it. And also then you build trust and confidence from others, and then suddenly it becomes easier and easier. So follow the courage of your convictions. If you have a strong opinion on something, you have an answer that's worthwhile, you share it. You share your answers, your solutions with people. That makes you extremely valuable.
Yeah. I've always said I use data as my armor, right? Yeah. Like I feel like I have to know my stuff way more than lots of male CEOs, but I use that as my armor where I can speak with confidence. And I want to know, Elevate had a recent leadership training program where we identified kind of next gen CEOs, leaders in biotech and pharma. And what was so noticeable, because it was a group of, pretty much 50-50 male and female, But what was so obvious was that the females in the room, every single one, were outspoken. Like they were way more outspoken and louder than the men in the room on average. And it made me think, like, you know what? To make it, you just can't be the quiet Asian. And if you are introverted, you are going to have to practice and get out of that shell.
Yeah, and I have to say, I am an introvert, and I still to this day have to like prep myself up, like I feel also remind myself at times that like I should say something, right? And what's just such a weird thing, right? But like it's not in my nature to be confrontational. It's not my nature to like butt in, or like that's not how I especially in my family, and also like in the course of my career, there was I needed that story. That's why I shared that story. But I also had multiple other instances of something like that that really like made me realize how important that was, right? That you have to say, like, at the end of the day, I don't have to earn the right to speak. I don't have to earn the right to be at the table, or even like just thinking about this job. Like, am I ready for this job? Like, you need people to kind of around you to kind of tell you you already earned it, whatever that means, right?
Exactly.
So, but that takes time, and
Time and
really
practice.
like
I think practice as
practice.
well. It's a skill that you have to keep practicing. And, but I also think Asian women and women of color in general, like we walk this very narrow line, right? You can't be too meek, but if we're direct, if we're strong-minded, we're oftentimes kicked in the teeth for being difficult dragon ladies. So I'm curious if either of you have ever experienced that feedback.
Oh, I know that I had a nickname that at the time it was behind my back, but it was Dragon Lady. But when you grow up being called names, you realize that some of it is actually not meant to be detrimental. It's kind of meant to be in humor, or it's a way of recognizing your humanity by somebody, right? And I think of all the things I've been called, and here's one. When I was in graduate school, there was a postdoc from Scotland, and you know how the accents are different. And he would say my name instead of one syllable Pearl, it was Peril. I don't know if you know Scottish people, you hear that all the time. And he used to call me Yellow Peril as my nickname, but he did it with affection, So, I mean, on one hand, it's a horrible thing, but at the time, and given who he was and the relationship we had, that was actually a sign of friendship. So people will call you names. They'll call you names, and this is multidimensional. It's not, here's a list of words we don't use. You have to take it within context. And
How about you?
I say that because I take the liberty of doing the same to other people in the right context.
Yeah. How about you, Aetna?
I think the how I've decided that it's important for me as a leader is just to be myself, right? Like authentic self. Sometimes you do have to like watch what you say, but at the end of the day, how do I want to be as a leader is authentic, transparent. I'm going to show my vulnerabilities, especially with my team. Like, I don't know the answer, right? I made a mistake, like all the things that I think are really important to show your side. And then when you do need to make some tough calls, or when you need to say something that may be counter, like they've seen all sides of you that also are not like she's trying to be like this dominant, aggressive decision maker, or whatever it is that comes with being aggressive or dragon lady, because they've seen the other side of me as well, that I am not afraid to share, right? And I think that's how I end up being able to walk this life. At least that's what I think, But at the end of the day, right? Like, there are some times that you have to come in and say, like, hey guys, all right, we've had this conversation. I've heard this, this, and this, but really, I think at the end of the day, we need to follow the following things, right?
I do think that a lot of female leaders are called whether it's Dragon Lady or difficult, but I tell every young Asian woman, if you're going to err on the side of Meet Mei or Dragon Lady, definitely just err on the side of Dragon Lady, because it's just inevitable. If you've got strong opinions, you're tough, you're going to be called that. You have to develop a tough skin.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things you're touching on, Aetna, that comes up a lot in questions for Elevate is,
Yep.
do you need to be a certain type? Like, do you need to act like a man, or do you need to, or can you really be yourself?
You have to be yourself. It takes too much energy to be something other than that.
Yeah.
You have to be authentic.
I agree with that. I agree. There's a lot of questions, active questions in the chat.
Okay.
One of which is around, developing relationships with people who are going to be supportive of you, right? Like, I've sometimes had people come to me saying, who I don't even know, saying like, I want you to be my mentor. And I'm like, that doesn't work, right? So what advice would you give to people in terms of creating that support network, that personal board of directors? Do they have to be Asian? Like, what's your view on that?
I mean, the 2 or 3 people, like the person that I told that story about, the senior person, was this older white man. My mentor, who happens to be the chair of my current board, is a older white man. And other people, and the professor that got me into undergrad research and was like my sponsor for such a long time, is a white man. So I'll have to tell you, right? Like, I think all of these, they don't have to be Asian. I think what it is that they see something that they in you, right? And so I feel like there has to be some like working relationship from my perspective, at least for me, that has helped me in my career, where they, the person and I have developed a trusted relationship, and that has come into, mutually, I think, hopefully beneficial. But it takes time, though, also, from my experience. But I would just say at the outset, like, find somebody who you've worked with that you admire as a leader and start from there. But they don't have to be Asian.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is older white men tend to be in positions of power to be the ones to not only mentor but advocate for you. And
Yep,
Pearl,
that's right.
I think you've had those types of people in your life as well.
Yeah, and I'm as you just said, that's the landscape, right? I mentioned somebody I didn't report to, who is senior, who made sure I got credit for my ideas, and did so not just for me but for others. We're still friends. It's been decades, but I've learned quite a lot from that person. I just want to mention, for anybody who wants to be in a mentorship relationship, it's not a passive situation where you just receive. One of the joys of mentoring is that if you're mentoring someone, you get to learn too as the mentor, right? It's a give and take. And so in my experience, the most successful mentor-mentee relationships are very active, right? You're working on some issue or some problem that you're asking your mentor to help you solve it, but you have to define it, you have to scope it, and you have to come up with a solution. And so these are really great opportunities to get to know somebody better, to get closer to somebody, but also to demonstrate what you can do and be in a situation where you can evolve and learn. So it's not like it's the high risk, you must deliver because it's a work objective. It's for you.
Well, let me turn the question around to both of you, because I know both of you care so much about developing other people. What is it in young talent that you see that you're like, I want to mentor and develop that person? What are those characteristics?
I have the privilege of being around super smart people all the time. And super smart people are really good at telling you what's wrong with the world and what's wrong with an idea and wrong with anything, right? That they're critical thinkers. What gets me excited is when somebody is doing that, but then comes up with a solution and doesn't like spend that much time on what the problems are, because very often they're obvious, but is courageous to just throw solutions up to get people to start thinking in a different way. To me, that's a rare characteristic. but it's so valuable.
What about you, Aetna?
Yeah, I really, you know, you can get it like immediate sense of that this person's really intellectually curious and passionate. Like like you can see the reason why they want to why they're asking these questions. Presumably it's about their career and why they would need, you know, our help and support, or, you know, just like and share our perspectives. I think that's what it is, because I feel like at the end of the day that is like has to be core to, you know, what we're doing. And I
Yeah,
need to just see that, you know, and want to help you on that, right? So
yeah,
it's really,
yeah.
otherwise it's really hard from a tangible perspective. I just feel like it's that
Yeah,
fire.
it's true. I call it I look for the sponges, like the ones with fire in their eyes, who are just sponges. They're curious, they want to learn. Whatever you throw at them, they're like, take it on.
Yeah.
They have that immigrant mentality, and I know I'm biased, like they're not talking to me about work-life balance. They're talking to me about like they just like, give me more, right? And I'll take it on and I will deliver. And it's, for me, I see people like that, I'm like, I am going to develop you, like I'm going to give you tons of opportunity. And then there's that, just it has to be authentic, and it has to be a natural kind of development of a relationship, right? It can't be transactional in either way. But, you know, for me, I agree with Pearl. Like, it fills my cup, and I learn so much from the people I mentor. So it is very much a two-way street.
Yep.
So curious with both of you, you're now both female CEOs, right? And curious about your path there. Did you always think you were going to be a CEO? Did you always strive to be a CEO?
No.
Yeah.
Remember, I didn't even know what I was going to do after grad school. And then I went to McKinsey for 2 years. I had no idea what I was going to do after that. That's when I started spending a lot of time with them on the phone with Angie. I'm like, what kind of careers am I going to have? Because I know I didn't want to be a consultant. Then I thought I really loved going into small biotech because I love the energy there and obviously the mission. So that's when I started in biotech, but that was like the worst. I mean, this is a bad market. 2008 was also terrible. So that's when I was starting to look for my first like biotech operating job. And I think that, you know, that was fun for a couple years. And then I was thinking I was going to be there for a really long time at this one particular company. And then the large pharma called, and I said, oh, I'm not moving to Switzerland. There's no way. I'm not going to go to big pharma because I love biotech. Like, you know, and it was one of those things where I learned also never say never, because this goes back to like, what are the things that like you will learn in this particular role, which was I was going to be chief of staff for the CEO who had just was promoted from Novartis Pharma to like Novartis Group, right? So that means overseeing pharma, consumer, generics. We were acquiring Alcon at the time. So it's like a very interesting transition to see how a CEO goes through that, managing a board, IR, right? All those things. And I was an outsider coming in. I was brand new to Novartis. So they wanted, like, I was like, you want me to come and help you with this? This is really interesting, right? So I can learn so much. But if I had gone in with my list of like, I want to do the following things, I'm going to stay in biotech forever, and then like check, like I don't think I would have, frankly, come to where I am today, and also like, you know, building the confidence, right, as I was alluding to earlier.
And given your time at Novartis and now biotech, do you think it's different skills that are required to make it to be senior in a big company versus biotech?
I think so. I mean, I have my limited 2-year experience.
I mean, I'll ask,
but also at the top. So I see how decisions were being made and who was able to make decisions and who had the voice, right? And what made those happen, what things happen. And I think it's different. It's different. What's the value there necessarily versus what like I think it's important at a small biotech, right? But
now
maybe that's a whole other conversation. So
yeah, and I've known you for a long time. Like, you were not ever thinking of being a CEO.
No. I went back into biotech for many reasons. I needed to move back to the Bay Area, and decided that biotech was still like where I derive the most energy, and I feel like that I could really learn a lot and also impart hopefully some value. And then I joined a company called NGM, and I was there for 9 years. And that's really where I built out a lot of my experience set, where then I said maybe at some point I could consider it, but even it took me a long time. Right, even 9 years. I like how I think, Angie, there were some times I'm like, I don't know, what should I do next? She's like, why don't you become CEO? I'm like, why? Like, I don't know if I'm ready. And she had done it before, and I was like, are you sure? She's like, you should just have the confidence and go do it. Right.
Yeah.
And
I'm
even
known for
after
shoving people to go be CEO.
you do. But you were very honest about what this job was like, right? How
Yeah.
tough it is, etc. But I think at the end of the day, I felt like, so I was on an executive team of 10 other men. I was the only female for 9 years. And, I would have hypotheses of my own at times. And I felt like, maybe this is the time to run my own experiment, so to speak. And that's how I decided that maybe it was time to do the CEO thing. I don't know, Pearl? Like,
yeah, Pearl,
Yeah,
you were in big pharma for so many years. I'm curious your thoughts on the secret to success. And you were senior at the research level in multiple pharma. So do you think it's different skill set that's required within pharma versus smaller biotech?
Actually, I think there's a lot of overlap because it's all about interactions with people who have overlapping but very distinct goals than you do, right? And part of being a CEO is aligning everybody on what is reality, what can be achieved, and then lining up on getting the resources to make sure it gets done. I actually didn't know what a CEO did when I was younger, and the door was not open to me anyway. And so, I thought, well, what I want to do is make more medicines, and I'm going to be in an environment where somebody gives me enough resources to do that. And as I moved up in organizations, one of the things I struggled with was collective decision making, especially when it was bad. So I think anybody who's been in a big organization has lived through bad decisions, even though the people who may have had the most information and the deepest understanding of what the alternatives were didn't have a voice. And so part of me thought, well, making decisions for thousands of people, for a company that's got tens of thousands of employees, if not 100,000 employees, it can be done better. And the more I lived through that, and then having the experience of jumping out into a biotech in 2010 and realizing how quickly we could get things done and how decision making could be so crisp, made me understand that this actually could be done. And then, I went back into pharma because I had a lot of opportunity there. And then I started to realize that I actually wanted to be the arbiter of the decision making. And I looked around and I realized that I could be as good at it as anybody else. And then when I realized that, I actually started lobbying for the position. So, I knew that I could be good at it, but I didn't come to that realization until very late in life, and in a way that was a bit circumspect because it came through that experience of being in bigger organizations, but also better understanding the environment. And then the other part of it is, again, it's an opportunity that was not open to someone like me 20 years ago. It was we're rare now. People like us were really rare 20 years ago, and 40 years ago, forget about it, right? So at least in this biotech environment in the Western US. So I love being a CEO. And I know people say this may not be healthy, but I feel like for me, it's a job where I can bring every single part of me to the table. And if you have the discipline of staying focused on what will make the company great, then you can pull that all together. And again, the only way to do it is if you're authentic, because there's not enough energy to be anything else. But if you're authentic, you'll get fellowship, and you need fellowship to do any of this, right? You need great people to come and want to work with you and help you solve the great problems and achieve the goals of the company. So
Yeah.
for
In
me,
any
though,
size organization, right?
in any size organization,
Yeah.
but for me, it's taken a lifetime to get here. And I spoke to some younger people a couple of weeks ago at the New York Stock Exchange, and I said, don't wait for this to happen to you, go and get it, right? And the minute I realized I wanted it, I went out and I got it, but it took me a long time to realize it.
But the flip side, I sometimes give people the advice, like, you have the rest of your life to be a CEO. Like, also get the experience, right? I'm maybe I'm old school in that way, but look, this is an industry that's experience does matter. And the advice I'd love to hear, like the advice you would give to young Asian women, but one of the ones I always give is like, focus on working and learning from the best people, right? People who are good, humble, great leaders, but also really good at what they do, so that you can learn, here's what awesome looks like.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also hone your craft. Decide what your craft is and work on it your entire life. So for me, it's drug discovery. And, you could argue, well, if it's drug discovery, why are you not CSO instead of CEO? Because the CEO enables the CSO to do their job right. That's why. And that's something I know how to do, right? And so, but I never stop honing the craft. That's what enables me to make the right decisions.
Yeah, when I hire people or looking to hire people, like I want to know why they're hungry for this job, right? And if I get this sniff that they're like chasing titles or want different titles, I'm like, then this is not the right place for you,
Yeah.
because I want you to like be really excited, like putting the company aside. Like, what do you want to learn? Like, what is going to be that growth area that you think is going to be like, something that you're passionate about that you want to work on, right? If I don't see that, then it's like, okay, like, you can go get a title somewhere else, right? This is not the right, like, because I'm going to be investing in you, like me personally, right? So
I totally agree with that. It is that immigrant mentality, but on the flip side, sometimes I see young women where they ask for things where I'm like, man, I wouldn't have had the balls at that, to ever
at least they tried,
ask for that. And I'm like, I kind of respect that, because I never had the confidence or, so it's like two sides of a coin there. Because sometimes we ourselves hold ourselves back, right? And Pearl, maybe you're referencing that a bit, and then finally you're like, wait a minute, I can do this, and I'm going to ask for it.
Yeah, totally. And I was thinking about, if you're smart, you will get it right. So you don't just ask for some random number, you do your research, you learn what other people are making, you look at the environment, you can back it up with an argument saying, well, I have this and this and that, and I can bring this to the table. And if you come in with an outrageous number or an outrageous title ask, you actually look incompetent, right?
Yeah.
So you do your homework and you get it right. And what you said, one of the best hires I ever made was a person who was a virologist but wanted to move into cancer research. And this person was very good and eligible to come in at a director level. But this person said, I'm moving from one therapeutic area to another. I want to take a job at the next level down so I can learn. And then if you want to promote me to a higher position, then we can have that discussion. It was one of the smartest things she could have done. And I was so impressed by her recognition of, even though she had all of this experience, she realized she was going into a completely new place. And within a year, she was promoted. It was clear that she could do the job. There are two sides to that story, right? Women tend to undersell, but at the same time, she was able to jump from one therapeutic area to another, and in a year, advance. And actually, she's a senior woman in pharma today.
So I did something different with my CMO hire in my last company at Ammunic. She's no longer this, but she was a very quiet, meek Japanese woman, clinical developer, but like incredibly well trained. After going through my company with like so many loud voices, she became way more outspoken and found her voice. But when she Immunix was the first job she'd ever considered outside of Genentech. And so when I was giving her the offer, like I knew she would be someone who would just be like, okay, I'll take it, right? And I basically said, okay, I'm going to give you this offer, but especially as a female Asian, like I want to make sure you have to do your homework. I'm giving you this offer, but you go get the comps from your colleagues, whatever, and you come back to me with a counter, just to train her. Like, and I said, this is important for you, the life lesson for you. And if you don't negotiate well for yourself, it's not going to help your team because you set the comps for your team. So I do think it's one of the things I think we try to arm, as part of the CEO sisterhood, we try to arm women with data to make sure they get paid fair and to make sure they have that conversation. Because God knows, most of my career, I just accepted the first offer they ever gave me.
Yep. I wanted to go back to an earlier part of the question, Angie, that you asked about like being old school and having the set of experiences to do the job in order to do this job. I would say like a lot of us, like, and especially I'm sure a lot of the people in the seminar or the attendees are coming from a very technical, analytical, scientific, like, problem solving background, right? And so you feel like I can probably derive an answer to make a decision. But I think a lot about what our job, and you look at what's going on out there, right? Like unprecedented, a lot of things that come that you have to deal with, like the bank imploding, SVB imploding, like what do you do?
Yeah.
Like a lot of things that there is no existing data around, or it just comes out of nowhere and you have to have the instinct to know how to deal with it, right? In that moment. And that requires you to have at least built up a set of experiences, right? Along with a team, right? But a set of experiences to know what to do in that moment. And so that's why I think it's important when I hear people say, I want to be the CEO and I want to be a CEO tomorrow. I'm like, that's great. Like, I love that passion and that drive, but it's important for you to also build out a set of experiences that are relevant for biotech so that when you're in this job, which is already tough with what's known, but like the unknowns, right, that come at you, like, how are you going to figure that out if you don't, haven't operated?
There's a
that's
great
my perspective.
Yeah,
so,
no, I totally agree. There's a great question by Athena, and the two of you are great models of this, is that how do you balance being a mom and being a CEO? So many CEOs don't really talk about that, but both of you have 2 kids, right? And how were you able to manage that? I know you don't get much sleep, but
well, there's first, if anyone's contemplating having kids, there's like no perfect time. Just do it when it's right for you and your family, right? So I would always just say that. Having gone through, I had 2 young kids when I was at my last company. In fact, I remember going through JP Morgan in my 3rd trimester, right? About to and we were headed into like a roadshow or TTW or something. And there were, so things just are never the perfect timing, right? We thought we were going to go public one time and we didn't. And then I had my 2nd baby just before the apparent next time, right? So, and then you're on the plane a lot and traveling, and you'll definitely need a lot of support and help. But at the end of the day, like, if you know in your heart that that's what you want to do, you should just go do it and you'll figure it out. I can't say it's easy, but I think that's the one thing I would say. You can't time.
And do you have, and because I know you're so close to your girls, like, do you have like rules in your head, like these are like sacred times for my kids, or like how do you, because you clearly, you clearly prioritize your family, but then you're at the same time a really high priority is also your job. Like they're very, So any tips or anything that you do?
Yeah, you just have to, I made that, I didn't go to a banking conference this week because it was my daughter's middle school culmination. I mean, there's things that that's priority, right?
Yep.
I can talk to investors probably don't want to be talking to anybody right now, so I don't need to do this, right? There's like, you got to think about where things are. But if you're in the middle of a deal and you're trying to close it and it's like, you explain to your family. The girls understand. I've been very open and transparent because I always want to know, what is your job like? What do you do, mom? Why are you working so much? Why are you always traveling? So I'm like explaining like what like why I do what I do, but what is important. And then I explain to them, I'm sorry, I'm going to miss this because I'm in the middle of X, right? But I'll be there the next time or next week or however it is. You have to be just as open as you are with your employees and your team. You have to do the same thing with your family. So.
Yes. Pearl, how about you? I mean, you
Yeah.
talked about
So-
you had kids when you're in grad school, and you talked about
Yeah.
how your next job, you're just focused on covering, expenses and,
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I went into pharma was I wanted to break even because I got great advice from my graduate advisor who said, make sure you spend as much money as you can on getting help. As Anna said, you always need help and you shouldn't be overly proud about it. And nobody does this alone. But I took that advice and said, okay, if I need to break even and do things the way they should be done, I need to go into industry. And that was one of the factors for that decision. Before I go any further, I have to tell you, I had 3 kids. And so since you're taping this, they might hear this at some point. I just want you to know I've got
okay,
3.
3.
You all of you you're I love you all. So, but again, when they were younger, I did not take on that much ambition, to be honest, and because the opportunity wasn't there for me. I think it's fantastic that younger than me women are CEOs, and because one of the key parts of being a CEO and being better and better and better at it is that you do it again and again, because this is a job you cannot study for. This is a job you need to experience, and if you do it right, you will get better every time. And if I see somebody who's under 40, who's a pretty good CEO at under 40, I think, wow, that person's going to be amazing by the time they're, 50. So I do think people need to spend time in this role, and in a variety, different, variations on a theme for this role, you just get better at it. And that means, yeah, you're going to have to understand, you have to know yourself, you have to know what's important to you, you have to prioritize and have the discipline of prioritization. And you won't do it alone. You have to have a spouse that's supportive in a genuine way. My mother used to say to us growing up, as a woman who grew up in the Qing dynasty in China, she would say to us, no marriage is better than a bad marriage. Which was pretty revolutionary, for somebody who was born in, 1924. So, yeah, you can't do it alone, and you have to make sure you surround yourself with the right kind of support and love.
Well, gosh, I know we're running out of time, and I feel like I could talk to you guys for hours, but one of the things for Elevate that I do want to call out, and I see someone even in the chat mentioned, is that part of Elevate is that we need to help each other as we identify other East Asian women who are talented. Let's help them get out of their shell. Let's kind of seek them out, support them, hire them, make sure their voices are heard the way Pearl's boss did. I'd love to just ask Pearl and Aetna any kind of parting words or advice to the audience here. We have a lot of young, talented Asian women listening in.
I just do have, like, when there was a couple people that asked about mansplaining, getting mansplained to, and then how do you get people to speak more and encourage others. And the only reason I'm bringing this up, and this is not the answering your advice question, but I remember I told you I was like in my last company for 9 years, where I was the only woman in a group of like 10 other men-ish, right? And then finally we had one other woman that was coming in as I was transitioning out. And this was one of our first executive committee meetings together. And things were going as per normal, the guys were talking about something and we're all listening. And all of a sudden this person said, wow, did I just get mansplained to? In the middle of the meeting, right? And I was sitting going, yeah, oh my God. It was like eye-opening for me, because like actually it was putting into one word what I'd been experiencing from time to like a lot, right? And also put the men kind of like, oh, like that's what that is. Like, like it was silent for a while.
That's
but
awesome.
She said it in a way, in a very disarming, but very like clear message. And
That is
I
the
learned
power
from
of
it.
humor.
Yeah,
Like to
humor,
get
Exactly.
and the men, I think, hopefully like internalize that a little bit.
I
And
love
I
it.
wanted to impart that, like, if anyone feels like they can be that person for someone in the room, like, do something like that, because like I think it can be very eye-opening for a lot of people. All right,
That's
sorry. I
awesome.
had to share
Pearl,
that story because
I
I like,
love
after
it.
9 years, I was like, oh, that's it.
Pearl, any parting thoughts or words?
Yeah, well, I wish you all the very best luck, and be confident, be bold, know yourself. It's pretty simple.
Simple but hard sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I know we're on the hour. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Elevate does have another virtual event coming up on Thursday, June 19th, which I hope you'll tune into, with my Elevate co-board member and founder of Lawrence Kim, who was the CFO at Moderna during COVID and is now the head of Ascenta Capital. And he'll be talking about how to be in the room where it happens and getting your first board seat. So you can find out about it on our LinkedIn page. But with that, thank you so much, and Pearl.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie and Elevate.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.